I know what you're thinking. Never in my 19 years of life had anyone ever presumed to know what was going inside my head, or even if anything was going on inside my head. But then my boyfriend Chris said these words to me, confidently, smugly. I know what you're thinking. So I asked, what? What am I thinking? And he said, you're thinking about seeing other people this summer. Now, in fairness, I was not thinking about seeing other people this summer. It was towards the end of my sophomore year in college, and I was very nervous at the time about a presentation that I had to give to my class the next day, and that was consuming my thoughts and preventing me from sleeping. However, after I finished the presentation, I started packing up my dorm, I wrapped up all of my projects and exams. I decided, this is a conversation I would like to revisit. As someone who had exclusively dated in long-term relationships in my brief dating career up until then, I hadn't had the opportunity to see a lot of other people. And it occurred to me, maybe that should be what we do this summer. I reopened the conversation with Chris, and he said, it's a bad idea, I don't like it. And I explained to him my rationale that I kind of felt like the relationship had run its course. I was kind of thinking maybe we should take this opportunity to break up. He didn't like that idea either. So we met a happy compromise of I would see other people that summer, and he would be unhappy about it. And he was very unhappy because I did see other people that summer. There was a bunch of guys. There was the one who kept taking me to the Hard Rock Cafe where one of his friends was a bartender. We could get served underage, and our tab was very low compared to the amount that we drank. There was also the guy who drove a CJ7. Now, I had recently bought my own Jeep Wrangler, and so the two of us would park side by side and race to see who could take down and put up our soft tops fastest. Then there was the outdoors guy. He loved to take me kayaking, hiking, picnics in the park. And sweet Southern Kettridge, who shyly asked if he could hold my hands after the movies. It got to the point that my mom was so upset, she had a full-time job beyond just being my social manager. So she finally said to me, Catherine, just because a boy asks for your number doesn't mean you have to give it. And I kind of blinked, and I said, Mom, these are the boys that I want to call me. I don't give my number to the others. Sometimes I just say no, and sometimes I give them a fake one. So then, all of these boys, it was too many for them to actually recall by name. They henceforth became known as their most offensive quality. So there was the guy with the noisy car, the guy with the earring, the guy with that hair. It was kind of it was a mullet. But he was so cute. But I did more than just date that summer. I actually had a full-time job. And I was super excited on my first day to don my khaki skirt and my white blouse and report to the Ann Pamela Cunningham building on campus at Mount Vernon. It was my first job that didn't require a polyester uniform, and I felt so mature. I joined 4 other summer students as historic interpreters. And we began our job by 2 weeks of in-depth training, where we learned all about the history of George Washington. We learned about the home, its architecture, its history through the years. We learned all about the art, the events that happened there, and about the grounds, the whole family tree. One of my favorite stories was about the founder of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union, Ann Pamela Cunningham, who actually observed Mount Vernon falling into disrepair and organized ladies, one from each of the states, to raise money to purchase the home, thus starting this association in a time when women could not vote or own property. We also learned about the animals. There were 2 oxen. They were very young, Zeke and Amos, and they were so pretty. They were learning to tow stuff around the property, but because they were so adorable, every time they saw a human, they would just stop and wait. Because they knew they were going to get pets and photographs and admired. Eventually, we had to trade them to the C&O Canal for some more mature oxen that already knew how to pull. And as we wrapped up our training, we also had an experience at the Mount Vernon Firehouse, because the home, as you may know, is 80% structurally original pine planks. Just in case, we had to be prepared to put out fires. So they took the 5 of us to a big barrel, they set things on fire, and we had to put it out. After our 2 weeks of training was over, we joined all of the rest of the historic interpreters in our lounge. And that was where we began learning how to read schedules and actually shadow some of the existing interpreters. After hours, I and 3 of the 4 other summer students would sometimes go out. We would go get a bite to eat, go play mini golf, socialize sometimes. Meanwhile, the coworkers that we had there at Mount Vernon, they were very interested in our lives. A lot of them were either retired or close to retirement age. They worked part-time, a lot of them coming out of the area around Fort Belvoir. Quite a lot of military there. And they were so curious about what we were studying in school and what we did for our hobbies and what our dreams were for the future. But now and then they'd kind of nudge me. Jamie's cute. But Jamie was my friend. Jamie did make me laugh. I remember one time we went out to TCBY, and as he paid for the yogurts, he handed over a bunch of singles, and then he points at the top one and he said, "Me and George are friends." I liked it. I don't think the cashier really understood what was happening there. But I was not dating Jamie. Absolutely not. I was dating all of these other guys. Jamie was my friend. But as the summer went on, the rest of the summer students stopped going out with us. And eventually it was just me and Jamie. And then one night, Jamie leaned in for a kiss. And then we kissed some more. And then it became a regular thing. But Jamie was living with his sister and brother-in-law, and I was living with my parents, and we had no privacy. And so we would find time to find a kiss somewhere in the car or somewhere outside. We even got chased away by the park police one time when we were in a cozy spot on the GW Parkway. All in good fun, though. But then, unfortunately, as summers do, it started to come to an end. And I remember it was our last day at Mount Vernon, and I was standing at the base of the stairs in the study, right in the open door where the breeze was coming in off of the Potomac River. And I positioned myself in such a way that I could see tourists if they were starting to descend the stairs, but so lost in thought was I that I didn't even see Jamie creep down the stairs. And I was already in his arms with his lips pressed on mine before I even realized he was there. And almost as quickly as he appeared, he was gone again. And he left me standing there weak-kneed and dizzy. Oh my God, what just happened? That was like the best kiss of my life. The day ended. We each put our stations away. We grabbed our stuff out of the lockers in the Historic Interpreters Lounge. We walked out to our cars. And there he wrapped me up in his big hug, squeezed me so tight, gave me a little kiss right here on my forehead, and then he was gone, back to school in Ohio. So I returned to the dorms, and pretty quickly thereafter, I had a conversation with Chris. And I think by then, Chris had caught up to where we were, and he was finally ready for us to call it quits.